3rd of May, 1994. The Australian Financial Review headline. Brash suspended as banks call time. Journalist Mahela Corrigan reports the Australian banking syndicate has withdrawn support from Brash Holdings Limited overnight. Brashs was opened in 1862 at 108 Elizabeth Street, Melbourne, by Prussian-Jewish immigrant brothers Marcus and Woolf Brasch, Australia's largest music retail dynasty. 3 generations of operational stewardship, 126 years of Brash family control. 6 years earlier, in 1988, Geoffrey Marcus Brash AM stepped down as executive chairman of Brash Holdings. 3rd of May 1994. Trading suspended. Shareholders receive nothing. In February 1998, KPMG appointed receivers. Debts of 80 million Australian dollars, 105 outlets, over 2,000 employees. In 2026, the red and white Brash's price sticker is still fused to a cracked CD case in an Australian dusty collection. The stores are gone. The stickers stayed. Before we go any further, if you want to keep these stories alive, I created a book with the complete Australian lost factories. The workers, the gates, the Australian made, all gone. The link is on the first line of the description. Back to the story. Chapter 1. Elizabeth Street, 3rd May 1994. 3rd of May 1994. Melbourne, Australian Financial Review front page. The headline, Brash suspended as banks call time. The byline, Mahela Corrigan. The Australian banking syndicate has withdrawn support from Brash Holdings Limited overnight. Trading in Brash Holdings shares on the Australian Securities Exchange is suspended. Voluntary administration is triggered. The 132-year-old Melbourne music retail dynasty is placed into external administration in a single overnight banking decision. 6 years earlier, in 1988, Geoffrey Marcus Brash AM had stepped down as executive chairman of Brash Holdings Limited. 6 years, 2,190 days. From founding family stewardship to Australian banking syndicate withdrawal. Brashs was Australia's largest music retail chain. Peak footprint of over 100 stores nationally. Approximately 170 stores, including the Allen's musical instrument arm. Australia's first major music megastore at 244 Pitt Street, Sydney. Over 2,000 employees. Peak return on shareholders' funds reaching approximately 25% by 1990. 132 years earlier, Marcus Brash and Woolf Brasch, Prussian-Jewish immigrant brothers, had opened a piano and reed organ shop at 108 Elizabeth Street, Melbourne, at the height of the Victorian gold rush. The signature is not the corpse. The corpse is the trading suspension. Trading suspended means the Australian Securities Exchange share price is frozen. Trading suspended means the shareholders, thousands of Australian retail investors, superannuation funds, and Brash family descendants, receive nothing. Trading suspended means the Australian banking syndicate that funded Brash's expansion through the 1980s and early 1990s has looked at the balance sheet and decided the enterprise has reached the end of the line. To understand what was killed on the 3rd of May 1994, we have to go back 132 years, to a Prussian-Jewish immigrant brother pair opening a piano and reed organ shop at 108 Elizabeth Street, Melbourne, at the height of the Victorian gold rush. We have to go back to Marcus and Woolf Brasch and the 1862 founding. We have to go back to Alfred Brash and the 20-year piano loan of the Great Depression. We have to go back to Geoffrey Marcus Brash, 2 stores in 1957, and the 100-store empire he built by 1988. And we have to walk into any Australian household in 2026 with a 1980s or 1990s compact disc collection. Pull out any CD, check the reverse of the CD case. The red and white Brash's price sticker is still there, fused to the plastic. Chapter 2. Melbourne, 1862, 1862, Melbourne, Victoria. Marcus Brash opens Brash's music shop at 108 Elizabeth Street, with his brother Woolf, both German-born Jewish immigrants from Prussia. Marcus emigrated from Prussia to the United Kingdom in 1848, at the height of the continental European revolutions. Established himself as a piano merchant, trading to Australia and New Zealand. Later relocated to Melbourne to run the retail operation directly. Woolf joined him in Melbourne. The two brothers together established the family retail business at 108 Elizabeth Street. Woolf later relocated to Sydney to establish the Sydney arm of the family retail interests. The Victorian gold rush is at its peak. Melbourne is one of the richest cities in the British Empire per capita. Ships arrive weekly at Port Phillip carrying prospectors, merchants, immigrants and Prussian-Jewish émigrés from the failed European revolutions of 1848. A middle class is emerging in Melbourne. Middle-class Melbourne wants pianos. Middle-class Melbourne wants reed organs. Middle-class Melbourne wants sheet music for parlour performance on Sunday afternoons. And the Brash brothers supply all three from 108 Elizabeth Street. The founding product line: pianos, reed organs, musical instruments, sheet music. The founding slogan, the marketing statement that will define Brashs for the next 136 years, is direct and Victorian in its confidence. A home is not a home without a piano. The Brashs' proposition to the Victorian gold rush middle class is that respectability requires a piano, that the middle class parlour is incomplete without musical performance. That the Brash brothers at 108 Elizabeth Street will supply the instrument, the sheet music and the tuning. The product line will expand across 4 generations: sheet music, records, white goods in the post-war era, vinyl records from the 1970s, compact discs from the mid-1980s. Audio systems, hi-fi, microwaves, video cassette recorders, televisions, musical instruments through the Allens acquisition. A note on family heritage that will matter later in this story. Marcus and Woolf Brasch were Prussian-Jewish immigrants of the 1840s émigré generation. Their emigration predates the German Empire. Prussia was still a kingdom in 1848. Their emigration predates the Nazi era by 90 years. The Brash family story is a 19th century Jewish immigrant success story with no connection to 20th century European events. This is not incidental colour. This is important context for the identity decision the family will make in 1914. Marcus Brash died in 1894. His son Alfred inherited the family firm at Melbourne's Elizabeth Street premises. And in 1914, when the First World War broke out and anti-German sentiment swept the British Empire, the Brash family made a decision that would define the brand for the next 84 years. Chapter 3. The Sea Comes Off. 1914. The First World War. Anti-German sentiment sweeps the British Empire. German heritage businesses in Australia face community pressure and hostility. German language schools in Australian cities close. German street names are anglicised. Germanic institutions across the British Empire lose customers, face boycotts, and in some cases suffer property damage. The Prussian-Jewish immigrant heritage that had defined Brash's identity for 52 years is suddenly a commercial liability. The Brash family, Prussian-Jewish origin, 3 generations in Melbourne, makes a decision. The C in Brashs is dropped. The surname is anglicised. The pronunciation of the A is anglicised from the Prussian to the Australian, from Brashs to Brashs. A single character removed, an 84-year brand identity created. 1929. The Great Depression arrives. Alfred Brash, Marcus's son, generation 2 of the Brash family, steers the company through the piano repayment innovation. Alfred extends piano repayment terms from 5 years to 20 years. His reasoning is Alfred Brash at his most characteristic. Pianos kept in customers' homes stay in better condition than repossessed stock in a warehouse. Repossession destroys value. Patience preserves it. The 20-year piano loan becomes the Brashs' Depression-era competitive advantage. Customers who cannot afford 5-year loans can afford 20-year loans. Brashs keeps the customers keep the pianos stay in good condition, and when the Depression ends and Australia rearms for the Second World War, the customer relationships are intact and the balance sheet is intact. The white goods pivot. Post-World War II, Alfred adds refrigerators to the Brashs product line as Australian household electrification takes hold. Ice chest trade-ins are accepted at the counter. The ice chests are on-sold in South Melbourne. Brashs is no longer just a music retailer, it becomes a general household electricals retailer. Piano upstairs, refrigerator downstairs. Sheet music in the front window, white goods in the back showroom. The employee share scheme. Alfred pioneers an early Brashs employee share ownership program. Uncommon for Australian retail in the 1950s. Brashs staff become Brashs shareholders. The family firm becomes an employee participation firm. Alfred Brash dies in 1962. His son Geoffrey Marcus Brash, the third generation of the Brash family in Australian music retail, takes over. Geoffrey Marcus Brash inherited 2 Brashs stores in 1957 when his father made him managing director. 2 stores, 108 Elizabeth Street, Melbourne, and one other Victorian location. When Geoff Brash stepped down as executive chairman 31 years later, in 1988, Brashs had grown to over 100 stores nationally, approximately 170 stores including the Allen's musical instrument arm. Australia's first major music megastore at Pitt Street, Sydney, over 2,000 employees. Peak return on shareholders' funds reaching approximately 25%. 2 stores to 170 stores in 31 years. Chapter 4. I Am Work, May 1940. Melbourne. Prime Minister Robert Menzies appoints Essington Lewis Director General of Munitions. On the wall of Lewis's office at Munitions headquarters in Melbourne, framed, in block capitals, I Am Work, Different Institution. Same industrial mobilisation logic. Brashs was not munitions. Brashs was not steel. Brashs was a Melbourne music retail dynasty, built on Prussian-Jewish immigrant industriousness across 4 generations. But the moral flaw of the Brashs enterprise is the same industrial-scale commitment that Essington Lewis embodied for Australian wartime manufacturing. Marcus Brash built the foundation from 1862. Alfred Brash preserved it through the Great Depression. And Geoffrey Marcus Brash, AM, built the modern empire from 1957. Geoffrey Marcus Brash, born the 1st of August, 1929. Educated at Scotch College, Melbourne, joined the family firm in 1949 as a 19-year-old. Appointed managing director in 1957. Company has 2 stores, 1958. Brashs floats on the Australian Stock Exchange. Family controlled but publicly listed. Capital access for expansion. The Brash family retains majority control, but the corporate legal form is now public company. 1965. Geoff Brash attends the Guangzhou Trade Fair, Australian retail delegation to Communist China at the height of the Cultural Revolution. He takes Australian jazz musicians Don Burrows and James Morrison to China as part of the delegation. Cultural bridge building alongside commercial exploration. The Brashs managing director as informal Australian cultural ambassador to the People's Republic of China 2 decades before Whitlam formal recognition. The Roland Australia joint venture. Geoff Brash partners with Ikupu Taro Kakahashi, founder of Roland Corporation Japan, to create Roland Australia, musical instrument import and retail distribution. Roland electronic keyboards, synthesizers and drum machines enter the Australian market through the Brashs partnership. Barbara Brash, Geoff's sister, becomes one of Australia's most renowned artists and printmakers. The Brash family cultural presence extends beyond retail. The Allens acquisition. Brashs acquires Allens Music, Melbourne's original 1850 Collins Street music retailer, combined with Brashs, creates Australia's biggest music retail chain. Peak footprint of approximately 170 stores, including Allens Musical Instruments. 1980. The corporate split. Brashs is split into two operating divisions. Brashs for audio systems, records, microwaves and later compact discs, and Allens for musical instruments. Two brands, one corporate parent. Complementary retail positioning. 6th of December, 1986. Australia's first major music megastore opens at 244 Pitt Street, Sydney. Multi-floor retail, every music format under one roof. Peak era Brashs cultural presence. Read that again. In 1957, Geoffrey Marcus Brash inherited two Brash stores from his father Alfred. 31 years later, in 1988, Brashs had grown to over 100 stores nationally and approximately 170, including Allens Musical Instruments. A single-generation expansion from a two-store Melbourne music shop to Australia's largest music retail empire. And in 1987, Geoff Brash and the Brash family made the decision that would end 126 years of family stewardship. Chapter 5. The Peak. The 1970s and 1980s. Brashs. The Brashs red and white logo is on every Australian high street. Elizabeth Street, Burke Street and Collins Street, Melbourne. Pitt Street and George Street, Sydney. Rundle Mall, Adelaide. Queen Street, Brisbane. Hay Street, Perth. Every Australian household knows the Brashs slogan. Every Australian teenager buys their first vinyl LP at Brashs. Every Australian family buys their first compact disc at Brashs when the CD format arrives in 1985. State one of the physical motif, the Brashs red and white price sticker on a mid-80s compact disc. Purchased at the 108 Elizabeth Street Melbourne flagship or the 244 Pitt Street Sydney megastore. Peak of the Geoff Brash empire. The red and white Brashs logo at the height of Australian music retail cultural presence. The Brashs cultural presence at peak era. Television personality Tony Barber of Sale of the Century, one of Australia's most watched game shows through the 1980s, fronts late 80s Brashs television advertisements. The Sale of the Century host as Brash's pitchman on primetime Australian commercial television. A 1978 Brashs television commercial features Sammy Davis Junior. Right on, Mr. B, Sammy Davis Junior, addressing Geoff Brash directly on Australian television. An American entertainment icon endorsing a Melbourne retail dynasty. Print catalogues distributed nationally to every Australian household. A dedicated Brashs music magazine covering Australian and international music releases. A Power Picks retail magazine spotlighting the weekly Brashs new release recommendations. Brashs sponsorship deals with Australian music promoters. 1993. Paul McCartney visits Brashs on his Australian tour. The former Beatle in an Australian music retail chain. The peak of Brashs cultural presence and the height of the Cook-era ambition to position Brashs as Australia's international music retail destination. Here's the thing. By 1988, Brashs had achieved everything Marcus Brash could have imagined in 1862. Australia's largest music retail chain. Over 100 stores nationally. A cultural presence on every Australian high street. Return on shareholders' funds reaching approximately 25% by 1990. A public stock exchange listing since 1958. A partnership with Roland Corporation of Japan Sammy Davis Junior on Brash television advertisements. Paul McCartney visiting Brash's stores. A 126-year family dynasty at its commercial and cultural peak. The Brash's price sticker is on every compact disc in every Australian household. The red and white logo, the 108 Elizabeth Street, Melbourne address on the fine print, the identifier that binds every Australian music consumer to the Brash family retail empire. And in 1987, Geoff Brash and the Brash family sold controlling interest in Brash Holdings, limited to the Cook family, Australian retail proprietors of the Waltons and Norman Ross chains. The Brash family stepped back. Geoff Brash remained a director. But operational control of Brashs passed out of Brash family hands for the first time since 1862. 126 years of family stewardship ended. And the successor management made a series of decisions that would kill Brashs within 6 years. Chapter 6. The Cook Family, 1987. 1987. Brash Holdings Limited. The Brash family sells controlling interest to the Cook family. Australian retail proprietors of Waltons Australia and Norman Ross, which the Cooks rebadge as Venture, and Norman Ross under their ownership. 1988. Geoffrey Marcus Brash. AM steps down as executive chairman of Brash Holdings. He remains a director. But the operational leadership of Brashs passes out of Brash family hands for the first time since Marcus and Woolf Brasch opened at 108 Elizabeth Street in 1862. 126 years of Brash family stewardship ends. The Cook era begins. 1990. Brash Holdings acquires the Angus and Robertson book chain, one of Australia's most historic booksellers with origins in 1886, Sydney, for approximately 20 million Australian dollars per Australian Financial Review. Reporting by Richard Webb on the 7th of June 1990. The strategic logic: diversify beyond music retail into books. Combine music retail and book retail under the Brash Holdings umbrella. Expand the customer base. Cross-sell books to music customers and music to book customers. Position Brash Holdings as an integrated Australian cultural retail conglomerate. The commercial reality: 20 million Australian dollars of debt-funded diversification into a category the Cook-era Brash Holdings management did not fully understand. At a time when the core Brash's music retail business was facing accelerating competitive pressure from mall specialists, international entrants and big-box discounters, the Angus and Robertson acquisition committed Brash Holdings to book retail infrastructure just as bookselling was itself entering a period of structural pressure, 1991 to 1992. Brash Holdings opens New Zealand stores, takes over HMV New Zealand locations after HMV exits that market. A brief cross-Tasman expansion that will not survive the 1994 collapse. Solomon Lew has a brief prior ownership stint in the mid-1980s, the same Solomon Lew who will later be at the centre of the 1995 Yunnan scandal at Coles Myer. Different company, different scandal. Brashs is not the Yunnan scandal. The Solomon Lew Brashs connection is a brief mid-1980s ownership. Footnote: Brierley Investments Limited holds 14% of Brash Holdings by mid-1994. Ron Brierley's New Zealand-founded corporate Raider vehicle, by then a subsidiary of Australian Consolidated Investments Limited. A minority stake, not a takeover, not control, just 14%, 1990. The white goods re-entry. Brash Holdings attempts to expand back into the white goods category that Alfred Brash had pioneered in the post-war era. The re-entry fails commercially. White goods retailing in the 1990s requires scale, logistics infrastructure and price competition that Brash Holdings cannot provide. The debt accumulates. The stores multiply. the strategic diversification fragments. And the founding family is no longer running the empire, and in 1992, at Doncaster shopping town Melbourne, a 32-year-old Australian retailer named Blundy opened the first Sanity store. Chapter 7. The Pitt Street megastore, 6th of December 1986. 244 Pitt Street, Sydney. Australia's first major music megastore opens. Multi-floor retail. Every music format under one roof. Vinyl records, compact discs, cassettes, musical instruments, audio systems, home electronics, and after the 1990 Angus and Robertson acquisition, books integrated into the megastore floor plan. The Pitt Street megastore is Brash's statement of ambition, the physical manifestation of the post-family expansion strategy. 6,000 square metres of Sydney Central Business District retail. A destination music retail environment, the largest music store in Australia in 1986, 1992. Doncaster shopping town, Melbourne. Blundy opens the first Sanity store. Sanity is a mall-based specialist music retailer under Blundy's Brazen Limited Holding Company. Blundy had been in music retail since his 1980 Jet store in Pakenham. Sanity is his mall-focused chain concept, small format, high compact disc turnover, aggressive expansion into shopping centre space that standalone Brash's high street stores cannot access economically. The Sanity playbook is precisely calibrated to attack the Brash's weakness, high street stores that cannot compete with mall foot traffic. 1990, HMV opens its flagship Sydney store in the Sydney CBD. The largest music store in the country by 1998. On the East Coast, HMV grows to 28 stores by 1998. The competitive pincer forms, Sanity on the mall specialist flank, HMV on the international flagship flank, and Kmart Australia, Big W and Target aggressively discount compact discs to loss leader levels on the big box flank. Australian discount retail chains use compact discs as customer acquisition traffic drivers rather than profit centres. Kmart and Big W price compact discs below Brash's retail cost structure. Here's the thing. The Cook-era Brash holdings had inherited a 19th century high street music retail model at the exact moment when Australian music retail was structurally moving to malls, to big box discount and to international specialist formats. A growing share of Australian music retail dollar spend by 1994 is happening in retail architectures that Brash's 108 Elizabeth Street standalone high street model cannot compete with. The Brash's store, from the Elizabeth Street Melbourne flagship down to the smallest regional outlet, is competing on a retail architecture that has become structurally obsolete within a decade. The Brash Holdings response. Expand more. Open more stores. Diversify into more categories. Take on more debt. The Angus and Robertson, 20 million Australian dollars. Book chain acquisition. The white goods re-entry. The New Zealand expansion. The continued high street standalone store openings, while Sanity captures the mall specialist segment and Kmart captures the discount price segment. Every strategic decision individually defensible. Every strategic decision commercially rational within its own frame. In aggregate, the diversification and debt load created a balance sheet that could not survive the retail environment shift. And on the 3rd of May, 1994, the Australian banks decided that Brash Holdings had reached the end of the line. Chapter 8, 3rd May 1994. 3rd of May 1994. Australian Financial Review. Headline: Brash suspended as banks call time. Journalist Mahela Corrigan reports the Australian banking syndicate has withdrawn support from Brash Holdings Limited overnight. Trading in Brash Holdings shares on the Australian Securities Exchange is suspended. Voluntary administration is triggered. The Australian Securities Commission notification is filed. Read that again. In a single day, the Australian banking syndicate withdrew support from a 132-year-old Australian retail dynasty. From the 1862 Marcus and Woolf Brasch founding at 108 Elizabeth Street, Melbourne, through the Great Depression, stewardship under Alfred Brash, through the 1957 Geoffrey Marcus Brash Managing Director appointment, through the peak 1988 footprint of over 100 stores nationally. 6 years after Geoff Brash stepped down as executive chairman. 32 years after his father Alfred Brash died. 100 years after Marcus Brash died in 1894. A single day. The banks that had funded Brash's expansion through the 1980s and early 1990s looked at the balance sheet, looked at the competitive position, looked at the Sanity, HMV, JB Hi-Fi, Kmart and Big W market share advance, and called time. Trading suspended. Shareholders receive nothing. The Brash Holdings share price on the Australian Securities Exchange is frozen at the closing price of the 2nd of May 1994. The company is placed into voluntary administration. The 132-year-old Brash family retail dynasty, surviving 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the arrival of radio, the arrival of gramophone, the vinyl LP era, the cassette era, and the compact disc format transition, cannot survive 6 years of successor management under the Cook era. The Cook era Brash Holdings corporate identity is Corpse. The Brashs brand survives temporarily. The stores continue trading under administration. The Brashs staff continue at the counter. But the corporate entity that Marcus and Woolf Brasch built in 1862 is legally, financially, corporately in external administration. Australian Financial Review coverage on the 3rd of May 1994 reports the banking syndicate withdrawal in factual terms. The banks did not accuse, the banks did not blame. The bank simply concluded that Brash Holdings could not service its debt obligations under the retail conditions of 1994. Sanity plus HMV plus JB Hi-Fi plus Kmart plus Big W. The Angus and Robertson diversification. The white goods re-entry. The New Zealand expansion. The Pitt Street megastore operating costs. The overexpanded High Street standalone store footprint. In aggregate, unserviceable. And in June 1994, a Singaporean businessman named Ong Beng Seng made a bid to save Brashs. Chapter 9. Ong Beng Seng, 1994. June 1994, Singapore and Melbourne. Ong Beng Seng, a Singaporean businessman, hotel and lifestyle retail investor, founder of Hotel Properties Limited, acquires Brash Holdings for 40 million Australian dollars. The stated intent: save Brashs, preserve the brand, restructure the debt, reduce the store footprint to sustainable levels, compete against Sanity, HMV and the discounters, restore the Brashs balance sheet and return Brashs to profitability within a 3-year Singapore-Australian retail turnaround program. The Ong Beng Seng era, June 1994 to February 1998. 45 months, 3 years and 9 months of rescue capital deployment. Let that number sit for a moment. 45 months of rescue capital deployment. Store closures, cost-cutting, restructuring, marketing repositioning. Every retail lever Ong Beng Seng had available was pulled. The Brash debt was refinanced. The store footprint was reduced. The management was restructured. The Brashs brand was repositioned. Marketing spend was redirected. Category mix was rebalanced. Underperforming outlets were divested. New shopping centre leases were pursued. And Brash continued to lose commercial ground to Sanity, HMV JB Hi-Fi, Kmart and Big W across 45 consecutive months. State 2 of the physical motif, the Brashs red and white price sticker on a 1996 or 1997 discounted clearance compact disc. Same 108 Elizabeth Street, Melbourne address on the fine print. Same red and white logo. Different corporate owner. Different pricing strategy. Different competitive position. The Brashs sticker at the moment of decline. The Sanity advance. By 1996, Sanity has expanded aggressively into Australian shopping centre space. Doncaster Shopping Town, Chadstone, Westfield Bondi Junction, every major Australian shopping centre. Sanity's small format, high turnover, mall-based model captures the segment that Brashs cannot economically serve. By 1998, Sanity is on track to reach 233 outlets by the end of June 1999, then 238 stores under the Sanity, Virgin and HMV network by 2000. The HMV advance. By 1998, HMV has 28 East Coast Australian stores. The international flagship music retail brand competing directly for Brash's high street position. The JB Hi-Fi advance. JB Hi-Fi emerges from the late 1990s Australian discount music retail environment as the eventual category killer. Peak market share up to 40% of Australian music retail dollar spend. The Kmart, Big W and Target advance. Big box discount compact disc retailing at loss leader prices. Brashs cannot compete on price with retailers using CDs as customer traffic drivers rather than profit centres. Ong Beng Seng's 45-month rescue capital deployment is not enough. 26th of March, 1998, Australian Financial Review journalist Nina Field reports, Brashs drops dirty dozen in bid to tempt a buyer. 12 stores closed in a last attempt to attract acquisition. 4th of April 1998. Australian Financial Review journalist Emily Carr reports, the future sounds grim for music store chain. And in February 1998, KPMG was appointed. Chapter 10. February 1998. February 1998. Melbourne. KPMG, the Big Four accounting firm, is appointed administrator and receiver of Brash Holdings Limited. Debts owing, 80 million Australian dollars. Outlets at receivership, 105. Employees at receivership, over 2,000 men and women across Australia, from the Elizabeth Street Melbourne flagship to the smallest regional outlet. The Ong Beng Seng rescue is over. The Cook era overexpansion is over. The Brash family dynasty of Marcus, Woolf, Alfred and Geoffrey Marcus Brash, 136 years of Australian music retail from the Victorian gold rush to the CD era, is over. And this is where it gets genuinely insane. In June 1998, 4 months after KPMG's appointment, Brett Blundy's Brazen Limited acquires 27 Brashs outlets from KPMG. Blundy's Sanity chain, which he founded at Doncaster Shopping Town in 1992, just 6 years before, absorbs the ex-Brash stores into the Sanity retail portfolio. The 6-year-old chain absorbs 27 stores from the 136-year-old giant. Staff continue at each store. Leases continue at each store. The Brash signage comes down. The Sanity signage goes up. The Brash stock is inventoried, relabelled with Sanity pricing and reshelved. The Brash customers walk into the same store the following week and find the same physical infrastructure, the same counter staff, the same product mix, under a different brand identity. The remaining Brashs outlets closed during 1998, some to the good guys, some to other retailers, some to landlord property redevelopment. Australian retail network journalist Ellen Cresswell reports on the 22nd of April 1998. Brazen acquires Brashs. Australian Financial Review journalist Lucinda Schmidt writes on the 17th of August 1998, Brashs was given the space to die with dignity. The Pitt Street Sydney megastore closes April 1998. The site becomes part of the ANZ Bank Centre Plaza redevelopment. Australia's first major music megastore, opened by Brashs on the 6th of December 1986, becomes Bank Plaza. The 108 Elizabeth Street Melbourne flagship, closed decades earlier in 1950, remained the symbolic address of the Brash family retail dynasty. The address Marcus and Woolf Brasch opened in 1862 ceased trading as a music shop long before the corporate collapse. The Allen's musical instrument arm, Geoff Brash's acquired 1850 Collins Street heritage retailer, is sold to private investors, including Roland Corporation of Japan. The Roland Australia joint venture that Geoff Brash pioneered survives the Brash's collapse. The Allen's musical instrument specialists continue trading under new ownership. The last time a Brash family member held operational control at Brashs was 1988, 10 years earlier. In those 10 years, the Cook family acquisition, the Angus and Robertson $20 million diversification, the white goods re-entry failure, the Ong Beng Seng rescue attempt, and the multi-front competitive pincer extinguished 136 years of Australian music retail heritage. And Geoffrey Marcus Brash AM lived another 12 years, dying on the 13th of July, 2010, aged 80. Before he died, he diagnosed the causes of the collapse himself. Chapter 11. The Sticker. Walk into any Australian household in 2026 with a 1980s or 1990s compact disc collection. Pull out any compact disc. Check the reverse of the case. If the CD was purchased at Brashs, 108 Elizabeth Street, Melbourne up to 1950, 244 Pitt Street, Sydney from December 1986, or any of the over 100 Australian Brashs outlets, the red and white Brashs price sticker is still there, fused to the plastic, impossible to remove. The adhesive that 1980s Brashs used was designed for retail security, not for customer removal. State 3 of the physical motif, the 2026 Brash price sticker on a cracked 1990s CD case. The stores are gone. The Elizabeth Street Melbourne flagship closed decades earlier in 1950. The Pitt Street megastore site is ANZ Bank Centre Plaza. The Brashs brand died cleanly in 1998, but the sticker survives. Here's the kicker. In Australia's peak music retail dynasty, the founding family survived 4 generations across 126 years. The company survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the arrival of radio, the arrival of gramophone, the vinyl LP era, the cassette era, and the compact disc format transition. And then, within 6 years of the founding family stepping away, the successor management killed it. Read that again. Marcus and Woolf Brasch's 1862 Melbourne piano shop survived 126 years under Brash family stewardship. It survived 6 years under Cook-era successor management. It survived 45 months under Ong Beng Seng's Singapore rescue. It did not survive the collapse. Before Geoffrey Marcus Brash AM died on the 13th of July 2010, he diagnosed the causes of the Brashs collapse himself. Not from external commentary, from his own analysis. Geoff Brash identified 7 causes: authoritarian leadership, cheapening of values, advertising that did not deliver, over-expansion, faulty management information systems, increased competition, internal conflict. Not one of those 7 causes is external. Not one blames a foreign raider. Not one blames a political signature. Not one blames a hostile takeover. All 7 causes are internal. Lesson 1. 1. Family stewardship is the empire. Marcus Brash built Brashs in 1862. Alfred Brash preserved it through the Depression. Geoffrey Marcus Brash grew it from 2 stores in 1957 to over 100 nationally by 1988. The Brash family did not sell the empire because it was failing. The Brash family sold because the founding generation was retiring. The empire that survived 4 generations of family stewardship could not survive its first generation of professional management. Lesson 2. Diversification without understanding kills. The $20 million Australian dollar Angus and Robertson acquisition in 1990. The white goods re-entry failure. The Pitt Street megastore overscaling, the New Zealand expansion, each individually defensible. In aggregate, they created a debt and complexity load that Brashs could not carry. Lesson 3. The 6-year-old killed the 136-year-old. Brett Blundy founded Sanity in 1992 at Doncaster Shopping Town. 6 years later, in June 1998, Blundy's Brazen Limited acquired 27 Brashs outlets from KPMG and converted them to Sanity stores. A 6-year-old chain absorbed the physical infrastructure of a 136-year-old dynasty. The Brashs price stickers on the customers' compact discs stayed. 1862. Marcus and Woolf Brasch open at Elizabeth Street. 1894. Marcus dies. 1914. The sea comes off. 1950. The Elizabeth Street flagship closes. 1957. Geoffrey Marcus Brash, Managing Director. 1962. Alfred Brash dies. 1988. Geoff Brash steps down. 3rd May 1994. Trading suspended. June 1994. Ong Beng Seng acquires. February 1998. KPMG receivers. 80 million Australian dollars debt. 105 outlets. 2,000 jobs. June 1998. Brazen absorbs 27 stores. 13th July 2010. Geoffrey Marcus Brash. AM dies aged 80. 2026. The Brashs price sticker still fused to a cracked CD case. 136 years of Australian music retail, 6 years of successor management, 45 months of Singapore rescue, a single sticker that outlives them all. The signs came down, the stickers stayed. She's a beauty.